Hey everyone, today I have Adam here. He's the CEO of Simply Measured, and today we're going to be breaking down social media analytics and what you should be tracking to get the most traffic out of your Facebook and Twitters. So, how are you doing today, Adam?
Doing well, Neil.
Yeah,
Good to
thanks for
see you.
taking the time.
Yeah, no worries.
So, let's get right in. So, if you're actually trying to get the most traffic out of Twitter, what should you be tracking first?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's a lot of metrics around Twitter, and there's no real kind of clear KPIs yet in this world. I think a lot of people are still sort of trying to figure out what to track. For our customer base, people are looking at tracking their audience, sort of who they are, where they are, what their preferences are. So understanding amongst your follower base, what kind of messaging do you want to put out that's going to resonate at what times. The other thing is your amplification. So when you put out messages, how much response, how many retweets are you getting? How far is that message kind of traveling? And then, of course, kind of conversion. So using your analytics tags and tracking traffic back down to your site and how well that's actually converting, so that you can test your various campaigns and efforts and see how they're performing through that funnel.
So let's go back to the first one. The first one you were talking about time. There's a lot of misconceptions out there that I've seen on the web where people are saying, hey, Tuesday at 11 a.m. is the best time to post on Twitter. You make a great point in which it's not always the same for each company. So when people say, hey, this is the time you should tweet, what do you guys have to say about it, and what do you think companies should be doing instead of just tweeting out there when everyone else is telling them to tweet?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, a lot of people want to say this is the magical time, 11 a.m. on Tuesday, that's when you're going to get the most traffic. But really, it does come down to, where is your audience? What time zones are they in? So you know sort of what time they're going to be awake, they're going to be alert, they're going to be able to read your messages, and then what times are they active. So amongst people that are using our tools and the customers we talk to, we see two primary kinds of analysis being done to think about time. So the first is just looking at your audience, your follower base, and being able to segment that by time zone. So, like I know that Simply Measured is skewed toward the West Coast when I pull our followers. We have a good amount of East Coast. We have a little bit in Europe. So I know that like if I'm thinking about breaking up the day and when I'm going to post messages, I should think about a West Coast style workday. If I post at 6 a.m., not a lot of people are going to be up and at their desks or consuming my messages. The other thing that we do a lot of is sort of parsing on various hashtags or competitors or keywords. So when people are talking about those things, and then that gives us a sense for when we want to insert ourselves into that conversation. So for instance, for ourselves, obviously, we're talking about social analytics. So we might look at the general trend around social analytics, social measurement, Facebook analytics, when people are using those keywords most, and then try to target our messaging around the peak times.
And how do you figure out who's using what keywords most often?
Well,
So
we
you were
obviously
saying
have
like
access.
the what?
We have access to a lot of data for that because we have a tool that does that tracks on keywords. With Simply Measured, we can throw in keywords and then parse out, over a long period of time, when is the conversation happening on an hourly basis and by day of week. So that's the kind of like level we're looking at. Is each hour, how many different sort of mentions and retweets of that keyword or hashtag are we seeing, and how does that compare to the rest of the day?
Cool. So when you're talking about your software that you're using for analytics, you guys have a free version, correct? Uh, Sorry about that. You got cut off there.
Yeah, we have a number of free reports. Yeah, we kind of got choppy there. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you. So you guys have a free version, right?
So yeah, we have a number of free reports that anybody can access on our site, what we call our freebies, and those let you do things like download your followers, see what time zones they're in, see what sort of keywords they're using in their profiles, download your Facebook fan page and kind of measure the activity on that, and as well as kind of compare to your competitors.
So let's
Um,
go back to the time zone one because I think that's a really important one. If I want to get my free report, how do I actually do it? So I go to simplymeasure.com, enter in my
yep.
Twitter handle, or
Yeah, so if you go to simplymeasured.com, down in the left corner, we have our freebies section, and we have a Twitter follower export. And then that's going to spit out a nice report for you in Excel that's going to break down your followers by time zone. And that gives you a sense sort of for the timing that makes sense. You also get sort of a full list of your followers. So you could even segment, by keywords and then by time zone. So you can really drill down if you want to do like more detailed customer segmentation about who you want to reach within that base.
So let's stick with the time zone one for now, right? So let's say I got a report. It shows something like 70% of my followers are West Coast, 20% are East Coast, and then the rest are all throughout the rest of the world. Now,
Mm-hmm.
once I have the data, my data shows that most of my followers are West Coast. What do I do with that data? Like, do I post specifically during West Coast times, or how do you use that data to pretty much maximize how much traffic you're going to get from Twitter?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you want to post during the times when your audience is online and likely to consume their feed. Um, so when I see like that Simply Measured has a more West Coast skewed audience, I'm looking at our report now. We have 32% of our followers are in the Western time zone. About 13% are Central, 22% are East, and then we actually have about 10% of our followers are in the sort of European time zones. So what that tells me is, like a little bit of activity for me on the West Coast being, sort of in the middle of the night might actually make sense to reach that 10% in Europe. But then I really want to ramp up during the day when the West Coast audience is coming online in the morning and being active through their workday. Since we're a B2B company, we want to be in context of people's workday. And we want to be getting messaging in front of them while they're at their computers, while they're thinking about things like analytics, and while they're trying to, solve problems around their marketing activities.
Cool. So now let's go to Facebook. What stats do you think people should be tracking when they're trying to leverage Facebook?
Yeah, no, it's interesting timing because Facebook has just announced a bunch of new page insights data, and there've been some changes on the consumer side, and now there's some changes for what brands are seeing in terms of the data being captured. So this world's really getting shaken up. What we see people tracking is obviously you want to track your audience, how rapidly you're able to grow your fan base, and then how engaged are those fans. So the Facebook now calls this people talking about. So you're wanting to see how many fans are actually taking actions on your page, and then from there you can kind of project that out and see the amplification. So then how much reach and impressions are you generating from those people, and then ultimately again coming back to how many clicks and how much conversion is that generating in terms of your business goals. If you want to drive people back to your website to sign up for something, then you want to track it to that. If you're sort of trying to build your email list or build up a different campaign, then we want to sort of track to those endpoints.
So cool. When you're talking about Facebook and you're trying to leverage it, is there any tricks that you've noticed that have allowed companies to get the maximum amount of visibility or engagement on Facebook's?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've noticed some interesting trends looking at a lot of the data for the big brands that we work with. And one thing I notice is that very short postings, asking questions, open-ended activities seem to perform really well on the per post level. So if you're trying to drive that engagement, which ultimately on Facebook is what you want, because with each time somebody engages, they generate a newsfeed story, and that sort of increases your reach and amplification. And we've seen that short messages, asking questions, being very open-ended and conversational tends to be very effective at driving engagement on your fan page, as compared to maybe driving people very hard to a promotion or a coupon or something like that. So that's been sort of an anecdotal observation that I've seen recently. What we see a lot of people doing is pretty detailed content analysis. So looking at all the posts you have and then seeing how much engagement did each one get, how much sort of conversion did each one get, and then trying to guide your activities around the tones and the way that you're casting these posts to repeat what's working.
So it's kind of like you may post 5 or 6 things, whether it's open-ended questions, things that are short, and you figure out which ones have the most engagement. You do more of those in essence. So you're pretty much mimicking what's working and then cutting off the fat on what's not working.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Some kind of segmentation to start to say, okay, we're going to maybe post 5 or 6 times a day. We're going to ask some questions, some open-ended questions. Maybe we're going to talk about some news or current events in our space. Maybe we're going to do some sort of linking or special offers. Maybe we take those 3 segments and divide them up, and then see which ones are really working, and then be able to sort of shift the balance toward which content is resonating the most.
Yep. One thing that I found out to work out really well is when you're talking about open-ended questions, I've tried short open-ended questions, and then what I'll do is right after write something that I think will be pretty attractive to my audience, I'll post a link to another post right above that says like, hey, check out this new blog post on my site or whatever it may be. And I've noticed I've gotten more clicks when I do that versus when I just post a link by itself and say, hey, check out my new blog post.
Oh, got it. That's interesting. So then there's that dynamic of, time between posts and how you sort of tie things together.
Yep,
That's really interesting.
exactly. So now let's actually transition back to Twitter, right? So I know you're saying it's different for each company, each site. Do you have any general practices that companies should be following or websites should be following if they want to get the most traffic out of Twitter?
Um, I mean, I guess a couple of general things. One is, creating good content is always number one. And I know it's obviously easier said than done, but having quality content that's on message and is going to resonate with your audiences is always
So
the number one thing. Uh,
with that number one, let's stop there and let's talk about you
yep.
guys, right? So you guys are a B2B analytics platform. You guys Twitter
hmm
a lot. How do you guys create good content? Like what strategy do you use to create good content that people can replicate?
So for us, it's a pretty natural time with our business. So we like to post a lot of stats, a lot of studies, case studies, infographics, data. Oh, here's an interesting chart, about Occupy Wall Street, or here's an interesting chart, about Apple, or here's an interesting chart about the iPhone announcement, right? So those are the kind of things that we like to play on by using data to sort of tell our story.
So it sounds like you're playing off of trends as well, like popular trends that are happening, like maybe what's on Google Trends, and you're posting stuff that you think will be hot during that time.
Yep, absolutely. Like we scan the sort of the industry magazines and blogs for our space. So we're looking at Mashable and Ad Age and PR Week, and we're sort of thinking like, what's top of mind today for marketers or people doing social media, and then we want to sort of provide interesting data or content around those stories.
One thing I've also noticed with your Twitter account when you're sharing good content, you're not just sharing content from your sites, you're also sharing content from other people's sites. Now, what content, right, other than it being related, how do you figure out what content you should share from industry websites to help build up your Twitter following?
Yeah, I mean that does get to sort of my number two on like best practices is kind of engaging with the right people in your space. So I think it's not just what the content is, it's but who's saying it. So we're following various people, and we want to actively follow new people that are in our space that are influential about the topics that we care about, and then we want to engage with those people. We want to be responsive when they're posting things that we find interesting. We want to be retweeting, sharing those messages with our audience. So I think we're looking at both who's posting as well as the content being relevant to our audience.
So you're retweeting, and one thing I always wondered is when you retweet all these messages, have you ever been able to get those people to retweet your messages? And if so, was it natural, or do you reach out to them, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I think naturally that does happen. People sort of when you retweet them or you help promote them, there's sort of this reciprocal feeling that just kind of happens naturally. We don't really push it. Um, but we do ask people to retweet us sometimes. Like when we send out an email with some content, with like a new blog post, a lot of times at the end we'll just say, if you like this, please retweet it. And it's amazing that works extremely well at driving retweets. We're not very forceful about it. We basically say if you like it and want to share it, we would.
And when you're telling people to retweet, are you giving them the button for the retweet, or are you giving them the exact code to retweet, or?
Sort of at replying everybody on Twitter with a clout score above 70 and asking them to retweet.
Got it. So when you're sending out that email to everyone, to telling them, hey, check this out. If you like it, retweet it. At the end, Are you just saying in a simple sentence retweet if you like it, or are you giving a button to click on, or are you giving the exact phrase to retweet? Like, hey, if you like it, tweet this, or how does that work? Like, what has been the most effective way for you guys?
So we've only done it one way so far, but I think this is something you'd want to test. And I've seen people do it a lot of different ways with the button or with a link with some specific copy. What we do is we typically link to our original tweet. So we link them to that page on Twitter that has our initial tweet. And then there's obviously the retweet button there. And I think that works well for our audience because they're very Twitter savvy. They know how to go and click the retweet button if they're inclined to do so. This isn't a high barrier for them. I think depending on your audience, putting the button right in the message could make a lot of sense to kind of lower that barrier.
Cool. One thing you mentioned also as well is you guys are building traffic from infographics,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Not
What?
as well as you though, Neil.
Yeah, we try to create them a few times a week. So when you create these infographics, it sounds like you're getting a lot of traffic from. What are you using to get, or what strategies are you using to make sure infographics are popping, right? Other than tweeting them out and telling your followers to tweet, but like, what formula are you guys using to create a good infographic? Like, what's the key to creating something that you think will spread virally?
So our approach, and I don't think this is right actually, Neil, I think you'd be better to speak on this, but maybe that's a different conversation. But we typically we're starting with the news. So if we assume our end goal is that this gets some kind of syndication into a bigger blog or publication or somebody influential tweeting about it, that we need to find a story that's top of mind for those people. So we look at tech writers on Mashable and TechCrunch and GigaOM, and we're like, okay, what stories are really top of mind for these folks? And then we look and see if we can pull any data to help them write a follow-up story. So we think about it from the mind of the journalist. And say, if I were this journalist and I needed some data to write a follow-up story, what piece of data would I want? What kind of infographic would make this really pop? And so I think that's the sort of the mentality that we have coming into it. And then I think timeliness is so important. So if you were going to do something on this whole Netflix story, you'd really have to kind of insert your infographic in front of people at the right time, at the right part of that news cycle, in order to get pickup. So to me, it's sort of like finding that thread and then acting fast enough to be able to put yourself in front of those people at the right time.
See, you actually learned something from me about infographics, right? I know we do a lot of them, but we just purely do it based off the data we can gather and what we think will be hot versus like we would research
Okay.
stuff in the social web, like on the Reddits, the Digs, the StumbleUpons, and see what's hot, and we'll create infographics on
Mm-hmm.
that. But the one thing we don't do is look at the viewpoint based off the journalist. Because if you're figuring out what journalists like and you're writing something like that, you're probably going to get more spread. And we've had a few of them spread, like on the Huffington Post and the news sites, but most of those have been quote unquote news related versus just general
Mm-hmm.
information that's like evergreen content. So with your feedback, I'm actually going to start having my guys actually do more infographics that are also time
Yeah.
based as well. So that's actually a pretty good pointer there. But yeah, we've been finding them really effective too. Because once we release like
It
some,
seems like you need both categories, though, right?
yeah, you need both. And I think if you do it right, you can start getting like 50, 100,000 visitors just for one really good infographic too. So and yeah, the other thing that we've tried, and I don't know if you guys have tried this, we'll take our infographics and then we'll email out all the related blogs and actually ask them to embed it, which has worked out pretty well for us. So I'm creating links to
Oh, got
traffic.
it. Yep. Yep.
So you can always check
Yeah.
that
Like I
out.
said, you guys are the best at that. We're trying to learn from you,
Yeah,
but
next
I'm
is
glad that I was
comics.
a.
Yeah, like the oatmeal
Yeah.
is killing it on comics. So you've seen the oatmeal.com. But
Oh yeah.
cool. So I know you're a busy guy. Just want to ask one last question. So if I was a business and I'm starting today, I really haven't leveraged Twitter, really haven't leveraged Facebook. What's the one biggest piece of advice you would recommend to a business if I'm trying to leverage social media traffic in general?
Yeah. I would say, if you're just getting started, to try to pick some narrow, more specific goals as you start, because there's so much noise out there. There's so many people, trying to push their messages and push their products and whatnot on these channels. I think if you can sort of position yourself as an expert or an authority on something relatively specific that's related to your business, I think that's how I would want to get started. Like if you have a furniture store, or you're like, we just know the most about, leather sofas and living room sets. I don't know, that's a bad example off the cuff. Um, that might be the area where you would really focus your attention.
So let's actually stick with
I
the
think that
furniture store example. And I actually think it's a good example, right? Because not everyone has tech businesses like you or I. But let's say you're a furniture store. You go out there, you create your Twitter and Facebook profile. What would be some of the things you talk about, right? So, like you mentioned, one, we got the best leather store, so you may want to talk about leather treatments for your furniture or something like that, right?
right, sure.
So, is it stuff like that, or is it just stuff like, hey, we're selling X, Y, and Z products?
So I think that you can't really go to the worst selling XYZ products until you've built your audience to some extent. Like I think you have to start with providing content, providing value, and then you sort of push your messages into that as well. You kind of weave them into the general sort of value that you're providing. So like, taking care of your leather furniture, or different interior design tips, right? Or different themes of the season or colors or trends in the industry. So putting things out there that are interesting and relevant for your audience. And then I think once you're able to kind of get a little momentum, that's when you start to say, oh, and by the way, like this set that we featured in our trends category last month is actually now on special in our winter sale. Right, so I think you have to kind of weave those messages back in once you can develop yourself as sort of a place that people want to come and a place that people want to engage.
So your strategy would be, if you're the furniture store, to first start off with giving good information on leather treatments, design, and stuff like that. One of the designs ones may end up talking about furnitures and where you place it, and you may showcase one of your pieces. And then you're saying you would do a follow-up maybe next week saying, oh, by the way, the piece we furnished last week is now on sale. We only have like X quantity, click here if you want it or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So I love that strategy, because then you're not just pitching your product, you're engaging them, you're first building it up, then you're hooking them by showing them design techniques, and if people really like it, there's a good chance they'll buy it, especially if you're offering them a really steep discount and it's just for your Twitter audience and like a special to them.
Sorry, you were cutting out there a little bit.
I was just saying that I like the angle of building up your audience through giving them good information, and then talking about the special or the design tips, and then talking about the furniture you're releasing in there, right? Or like saying, hey, here's some 10 ways to design your contemporary room better, and talking about your sofa.
Right.
And then in the third tweet, you can end up talking about, hey, by the way, the sofa that we showcase in there is for sale and it's discounted at this price only for Twitter users, and really have one or two.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I love that approach, because I think you're right. You're building up your audience first, give them good information, and then you're selling to
them. Right. And I think if you build up that good sort of content flow on your social channels, it makes it a lot easier to bring people in from your other channels. Like maybe you already have an email list built up, or maybe you have people coming into your business and you want to send them to your social media presence. When they get there, if they come see valuable content, they're going to be a lot more likely to then subscribe and like continually engage with that channel. So I think if you build up that content first and then sort of start trying to promote it and sort of build your audience and sort of push product, I think it works a lot better and people are able to gain a lot more momentum.
Yeah, Chad, gave me a good idea right there. So you said if you have an email list, a lot of companies have an email list. How would you get your email list to subscribe to your Twitter or Facebook feed? Like, what would you write them in an email that you think would be effective?
What we typically do, we don't have all our email subscribers following us on Twitter, only a fraction do, is, we're starting with some content, like this is a case study or an interesting infographic, and then we're sort of following and saying, if you want to get more of these messages, we post these on Twitter and Facebook in a more regular interval. So I think that can be a nice way to sort of tie it together, is just if you have sort of a consistent voice across those channels, you can make the sell from email to social being a sort of, do you want to get more? Do you want to engage with us deeper? Do you want to sort of get the more frequent and exclusive updates? If you're already providing a value through your email channel, I think that people that are seeing that may want to get more value through your social channels.
I like the angle because what you're pretty much saying is if you want more of this and on a regular basis instead of once every week or once every month, subscribe to our Twitter feed and Facebook feed.
Yeah, exactly.
So
You have to live up to the promise though, right? Then you have to actually be, keeping the content fresh on those channels so that when people subscribe, they're not like, wait a sec, this is the exact same thing I get over email.
Yeah, that's a good point. You have to write different content and actually keep it fresh, which is more work, but it could be worth it in the long run. So,
yeah.
So thank you for providing all the feedback and doing this interview. And for everyone out there who's trying to get more data on your Facebook and Twitter campaigns as well as profiles, you can check out simplymeasured.com and you can use a lot of their tools for free. They have the freebies section there. And if you like it, you can check out their paid stuff as well. So thanks, Adam, and
Cool.
have a great day.
Thanks, Neil. Later, man.